House.
Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
A lot of questionable circumstances around that. So break it all down for our audience.
Yeah, so the FBI piece is our latest story that just came out today. So I'm sure we will definitely dive into that. But how we all got here, Brianna, it's an interesting web, and it's been over the last few months. If you go back to February, there was an alleged assault at his D.C. penthouse with his now girlfriend, Sarah Raviani. Now, both of them now claim that nothing ever actually took place there, even though she had bruises on her arms and the police were there. No charges were ever filed. But that is the first thing that said, this guy that we think is such a good guy, well, maybe we should look a little further. So this is when somebody said, if you think this is interesting, you should go look at the marriage certificate. So I looked at it. You brought it up there. And of course, he's confirmed this with Blaze News that he was married by Mohammed al-Hanouti, who is a radical Muslim mufti there in the D.C. area. Now, Corey says that he had to do this because, one, his mother-in-law wanted them to be married by an Iraqi. Okay, sure, you're going to make your mother-in-law happy, but Brianna, why would you go through and start with the mufti of D.C.? If all you needed was an Iraqi, like this is like the cardinal of the Catholic Church. And then you go through, and his other explanation for this is that his wife wasn't technically divorced under Iraqi law. So when she was going to be traveling back there, they would not have looked at her divorce by saying that she was, legally free and clear, divorced of her husband, and that she had, she was getting married to another man. And so there would have been a lot of misinterpretation. So Corey needed to do whatever he needed to make sure that she was safe when she was traveling back to Iraq. So it's been an interesting web, and we put that story out, and then his now girlfriend, Sarah Raviani, put out in the Daily Mail later that weekend that everything that we published was entirely untrue. Brianna, she said, no, we pray together in private. He's gone to church with me and my family. He doesn't need to pretend. Well, okay, that's interesting, except for the fact that Blaze News and myself personally have talked to 5 people who say back in 2014, Corey Mills told them personally, and one of them went on the record with us saying that Corey Mills told him that he had converted to Islam. Now, I will say the other 4 are still not coming out publicly with their names because they are pretty afraid and terrified of Corey. That's what they tell us. They don't want their name associated. They don't know what the backlash will be for this, but it's an interesting web that we started to uncover.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday, folks. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube and X-Spaces simulcast. Well, calling out potential corruption in politics is very important, especially when it's our side. When I came into the media business, I made a promise to myself and those that follow me that I would always do my utmost to follow the facts and the truth and let them know when something I say is my opinion. That's not an easy thing. You know that, especially when I must have tough conversations about people I consider allies. That's the case for this story, but I've followed the questions surrounding Congressman Mills for a couple of months now as it's developed without saying anything, because sometimes you have to let the facts come out. Well, Congressman Mills is a man who routinely displays the courage, real courage, folks, to do things like help anyone in need. And we've seen him do it from his military service to helping people get out of Haiti when it was in turmoil and providing assistance to all those in need in the western North Carolina after Hurricane Helene when the federal government abandoned them, including in getting at people out of Afghanistan. really courageous guy, and he puts his actions where his mouth is. But the time to have a conversation about this issue is now, because something strange is going on, and it also involves the FBI. So we're going to do that today. And as usual, another piece to this at the end of the show is the Capitol Police corruption. That's caught our attention again with the recent naming of the new acting chief that our colleagues have investigated before due to his corruption. And now acting chief Sean Gallagher is being called out as so corrupt, even by the union that's submitting letters opposing his being named the full-time chief. Well, the investigative journalist involved in investigating both of these stories I know best is Steve Baker. You've seen him on the show before. He's a good guy. He's a musician turned independent investigative journalist, an accused J6 terrorist pardoned by President Trump, and now an official Blaze journalist with Glenn Beck's outfit. Steve, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. Man, I never dreamed I'd be having conversations like this with you when the first time I got to interview you was because you were the only person in America covering the Oath Keepers trial on the scene.
Right.
Welcome back.
Been a long time. Thanks for having me back, Colonel. In fact, I don't think I've talked to you since I received my, I got better than a pardon. I actually got a case dismissal with prejudice. And so basically my case was gone. It's like it never happened. Of course, it did. I had to put up with it for 4 years, but nevertheless, it's completely off my record, and I am no longer have that monkey on my back. But yeah, so that's good. And you know, we haven't stopped investigating the Capitol Police. We haven't stopped investigating January 6th issues. In fact, we're about to have a treasure trove of January 6th information that we would have never had access to otherwise than the President Trump now appointing the right people to the right departments, so that are giving us access to things that we've never been able to get our hands on before. So I think we're going to learn a lot in the coming months. It's going slower than we want. Everybody knows that. Everybody's complaining about that. There's some reasons for that, and then there's some frustrating inexplicables behind that. But nevertheless, that's happening. And then all of a sudden, this Corey Mills thing gets dropped in my lap a couple of months ago.
Yeah. How did you get onto this? One, I mean, I follow you, so as soon as I started seeing it, I'm like, wow, so what the heck's going on here? Because I have full confidence in you, and I have a lot of confidence in Mills, mainly because of what I've witnessed him do. So I've been tracking on it. What got you? What got on your radar screen that caused you to get into this and dig into this?
Yeah, I'm gonna go to the genesis of this for you, but I'm going to comment first on what you said. You see, we have all had a lot of confidence in Congressman Corey Mills. In fact, we all thought that, well, I mean, like Glenn Beck called him on his own podcast a few months ago. He said, "You're Captain America," you know?
Yeah.
It just seems like that. He's in all the right places at all the right times, doing the right things, rescuing the right people from the most dangerous locations. He's got the background, he's got the history, he's got the awards, he's got the service record. And then when we started looking into all of this, maybe not. And it's tough to take because it put us in a position where we feel like we're firing arrows into our own tent, and none of us want to do that.
Right.
Certainly, when you have the founder of the Blaze having Congressman Mills on his own show, and for an hour and 15 minutes, probably 10 or 15 times, said, "You're Captain America," because that's what it looks like. And then the genesis happens, and it knocked us all for a loop. So I've got to go back quite a ways. As we know, the congressman has participated in some rescue operations: Afghanistan, Israel, Haiti, Western North Carolina. Well, in the first 2 or 3 days after the big storm came through in Western North Carolina at the end of September, the Blaze and Mercury One, our relief organization, did a trip up there with Glenn Beck in tow. it was the host of our show, our Blaze TV show, The Mandate, Jill Savage, who you showed the video of on here
Yep.
just at the top of your show today, and then another one of our correspondents, Julio Rosa, was with them as well, and so they were on the ground there, and they were with Corey Mills on the ground. They got to spend time with him, and then a very strange and odd thing happened. When they had finished their time on the ground, they were all in the same helicopter together going back to the Asheville airport to fly out
Hmm.
towards their respective destinations. And this seems, Colonel, I think you and your audience will understand it. So I'm just going to say what happened, and people can come to their own conclusions. Completely for no reason, out of the blue, a non sequitur to the events of the day and the things that they observed that day, Congressman Mills went into this discourse with the people on the helicopter, specifically talking about his failed marriage, that he was going through a divorce, and how lonely he was, and that he had been with nobody for over a year. And he's
Mhm.
just like pouring this sob story out to these reporters from the Blaze, including Glenn Beck.
Wow.
You saw in the video there, Jill Savage, host of The Mandate. She's an attractive woman. So, you kind of go, all right, Congressman, you're putting it out there. You're putting it out there that you're free, you're available, you're rich, you're powerful, you got it going on, you're a hero. Okay. So that's kind of what everybody thinks is happening, right?
Right.
No big. Now, let's fast forward. So this was late September, the very close of that month. If you fast forward all the way to February 19th of this year, and was a call that came in to the Metropolitan PD from a luxury penthouse apartment in DC at 1 p.m. And they answered that call, and it was a domestic violence call from a young Iranian woman who happened to be, we found out later, Congressman Mills' girlfriend, who had been living with him for over a year. And so you take the timelines and you overlap that. In September, he's saying how lonely he is. He hasn't been with anybody in over years, going through a divorce. He's still going through a divorce. He's still not divorced. But all of a sudden, there's a domestic violence call at his apartment. The police, in the police report, record that there were bruises on the young lady. They record that, in fact, that they overheard Congressman Mills admonishing her to change her story, that she needed to recant. And then they also put in the report that they had admitted that they had been living together for over a year. So it seems like a simple lie. The one thing that we're not interested in, Blaze, is a story of salacious sex tales of congressmen. That's not what our business model is. It's not what we get off on. There are other people looking into that as it relates to Congressman Corey Mills, and we're going to let them handle that part of the story. But what happened in that situation was we were lied to.
Yeah.
And if you're going to lie to us about that, what else have you lied to us about? And quite frankly, Jill was disturbed by this. They had exchanged phone numbers. They had never gone out on a date. But they had, they had some communication. He had asked her out. And then when this story pops out, well, she's like, okay, I've been lied to. Well, she went on this thing like a rabid dog on, on a really juicy bone. And she went nuts with this. They started investigating that. And what they found out right off the bat was that they discovered that there had actually been people working on the Corey Mills story going back for years, at least till 2021, when he first ran for Congress here in the 7th District of Florida. I'm actually in Florida right now on this story, and I've been down here for a couple of weeks already, almost 3 weeks.
Right.
And
well, Steve, we got to take a break,
okay.
A commercial break, real quick. When we come back, we'll see another clip from Jill and Brianna, and then we can continue this conversation, because this is critically important that people understand how this genesis started, but also where you're at, because I mean, this story is incredibly different than what the public has usually known about this particular congressman. We'll be right back with Steve Baker.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Would you like to gain access to over 20 years of my radio shows, TV shows, my books? I've written 15 books, and most of those books are ebooks now. And we have conference DVDs, conferences where we filmed our conferences at the Ozarks, literally starting 20 years ago. It's all available in our archived vault. All you have to do is go to worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and for a reasonable monthly fee, you gain access to over 20 years of Christian worldview programming, news, information, books, documentaries, and a powerful search engine. And folks, it's a great way not only to educate yourself, equip yourself, but it's a big way that you can help fund our continuation as a broadcast network. Please check it out. worldviewtube.com/vault, worldviewtube.com/vault, and help us continue pushing out a Christian worldview.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when you start to dig into all of this, because there's a lot of questionable circumstances. And it's not just the Muslim angle to all of this, although I did get a good chuckle at his, he did respond for comment when you guys did reach out. And I believe the word bigot was used, so he lost me there with that. But ultimately, I find it very interesting now, because you put this out and now the FBI seems to be circulating and coming around and talking to people who might be your sources in all of this. But the interesting part is it's one agent, if I understand correctly. And then the FBI also gave you a statement that has me scratching my head.
Yeah, so the FBI is involved in this in an unusual way, Brianna. So we did a story on stolen valor because Corey Mills, his cornerstone of his campaign is, "You should elect me. I'm a veteran. I was blown up twice in Iraq, and I'm a great businessman." Now, Corey himself told our reporter Peter Giedel on the phone that he was not blown up twice in Iraq. He said the first time he got a concussion, and Peter said, "Oh, okay, sure." And then he said, "What about the second time? You weren't blown up in that one?" And he said, "That's correct." So that part of the story is taking on a life of its own. But then we reached out to all of our sources in the stolen valor story, and we come to find that there is a woman, a female FBI agent, who is questioning these people. We have 3 of them that we have personally talked to. And they said she went through and she wanted to know all of the stuff about stolen valor with Corey. And she eventually got to the point where she said, you know what? We've determined that there's enough plausible deniability there. We're putting that one to rest. But what do you know about his business ventures, right? And then it was just an unusual thing. She was coming there. She wasn't even showing up in person. She was doing a lot of this over the phone and text messages. It wasn't 2 people at the door, Brianna, like we normally would see. It wasn't a lot of in person. And then the time that it was in person, she went through and she was just sitting there at a Starbucks with one female, and she was just sitting there listening to her tell the stories like you and I would be sitting here talking. Now, if it was a congressman that was under FBI investigation, there would be even more rules, Brianna, than there would be just if they were looking in to you or me. So our sources said, something doesn't feel right about this. What if we're the ones that are actually being investigated? And we did get that comment from the FBI. After we told them this story, the FBI said that, quote, "We are not aware of the conduct in question, but will review the matter immediately." They told us back on May 16th. As always, any unethical behavior will be addressed swiftly and appropriately. And a spokesperson added that senior leadership was made aware of the situation.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. And my guest today is one of the investigative journalists working on this story with Jill Savage there, who's also from The Blaze, Steve Baker. He's my guest. And Steve, when we went to the break, I don't want to dive into the FBI thing yet, but just to tease it a little bit, that's what got me interested when you reached out to me and said, "Hey, you ready to talk about this?" I had seen that part of the story that you were talking about. I'm like, what the heck? But you were talking at the break into the genesis of this, and that Jill was like tearing into it
Right.
very well, and then you got involved.
Yeah. So eventually, what happened is, as I mentioned in the previous segment, as they started looking at this, they realized there had been people working on this story, particularly the stolen valor allegations related to Congressman Mills,
Mhm.
going back to claims he made in his campaign. But these are claims that go all the way back to, of course, you know what a DD 214 is.
Mhm.
And so not only his exit paperwork out of the Army, but then he also spent several years with a variety of contractors, private
Mhm.
contractors, military contractors, security contractors, working over in the hot spots over there, Iraq and Afghanistan. And there was eventually working with one of those contractors by the name of DynCorp. He actually was fired because once they had a problem with another of their contractors, and with their background not being
Mhm.
exactly accurate. And if you have somebody on mission with you in a hot spot like that, and all the other guys are these tier one special forces guys, and
Mhm.
then you have a guy that lied about his background, he lied about his training, he lied about his skill set, and these other men are relying upon you in that desert
Mhm.
situation, and they find out, well, what they do is they fire you.
Yeah.
And so he got caught up in an investigation because somebody else had got caught in a lie. And then DynCorp itself, this goes back to the mid 2000s, early 2000s rather, when he was working for DynCorp after the military, his time in the military, and they discovered, in fact, that he had not done some of the things that he claimed he had done, and for the reasons that they had hired him. He was, in fact, he had never been to Ranger School, as he claimed that he had. He claimed that he'd been to sniper school and that he was a qualified sniper, and he had never been to sniper school either.
Mhm.
They discovered that. They discovered other anomalies about his DD 214, and he was fired from that operation. And then, as I said, because people had been working on this for some time, we started seeing a lot, and then we start seeing things going on with his business. Then we start seeing things happening with his marriages.
Mhm.
The first marriage that caught our attention was the marriage to the Iraqi woman in 2014, because it took place. We got his marriage certificate. It took place in the most notorious mosque in America, in Falls Church, Virginia, right outside of D.C. This is a haven for launching radical Islamists out of there, people convicted of terrorism in this country. And then
Mhm.
in addition to that, the actual imam, or as Jill pointed out, the mufti, what she properly equivocated to like a cardinal in the Catholic Church, that level of leadership in that faith, he actually performed the ceremony for Corey Mills and his Iraqi wife. Now, eh, Colonel, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but you don't get married in a mosque like that at that level, and you don't get to be married by a grand mufti or whatever you call them at that level. In fact, that mufti is not even allowed to perform that ceremony unless you are Islamic.
Muslim.
You're a Muslim.
Yeah.
And so we have, as she mentioned in that first piece, we have five sources telling us that he told them himself that he had converted to Islam back during that period. So with that groundwork laid, now we're looking at his marriages. Now we know that there was a previous marriage. We know that there's children, a son by each of those. In the process of looking at his marriages, we discovered a third one which he has never talked about. So now we're into lies of omission and stories that he's not told.
Mhm.
You heard her talk about the two IEDs that he was blown up in. This is his, now when I say he was blown
Right.
up, this is his campaign rhetoric. This is what he's had on his website. This is what he made in stump speeches. This is what he
Mhm.
raised money off of, was being blown up into IED attacks. In a 57-minute recorded phone call with one of our Blaze reporters, Peter Giedel, the congressman admitted that one of those never actually even happened, and that the second one, yeah, he bounced off a windshield and got a minor concussion. In fact, it wasn't bad enough that he was taken off duty. He was told to go rest for 24 hours, and he didn't even qualify for Purple Heart from that. So he had exaggerated those, which are the kind of things that made stolen valor is an important thing for guys like you.
Yeah,
that
and
serve.
in politics, and as somebody that's been a political candidate, man, that's one of the things that I tried to watch my campaign team on very closely to make sure they're not embellishing. Matter of fact, underplay something before you think about embellishing.
Right. So
Yeah.
in the middle of all of this that's going on, I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not even involved in the investigation at this point. We've got other reporters working on this story, and they're keeping me abreast of it, and they're sending me things. And then finally, when we get around to this story about the FBI, okay, it was time for them to they not only said, okay, you're in now because this is getting into your world. Because when we start
Yeah.
really into FBI, CIA, DOD, the intelligence community, that sort of thing, they typically run that by me. And what ended up happening was, as I started reviewing what was taking place, I began to become suspicious that this particular FBI agent might actually be running rogue. And here's what I mean by that. Not only her name was Special Agent Shay Tally Bradley, hyphenated last name. She also, believe it or not, she is a retired colonel from the Army.
Oh,
She did 10 years in active duty and then 19 years in the reserves. Sometime during her reserve period, she joined the FBI. And she eventually qualified and retired from the Army as a full bird colonel, and then with the overlapping career in the FBI. And so when she started approaching our sources, she postured the relationship as though that she was investigating Congressman Mills' claims or the allegations about stolen valor related to Corey Mills, and that the reason why she was, doing this was that she had been referred to this case. Well, okay, so you've got a group of open source investigators. These are private citizens. They're not working for a news media. They're not working for any agency of any kind, but they work for organizations that investigate stolen valor. This is what they do. One of them in particular actually had a relationship going back to DynCorp with Corey Mills. And to be honest with you, if I'm being perfectly upfront, these are people that want to see Mills criminally convicted because not only of the numerous incidences of stolen valor, but also because he raised money off of it, those claims. And that is, in fact, a federal crime and it's a felony. So one of the things that we began to see happening in this process from this FBI agent is that she was very, very, very interested in stolen valor at the very beginning. And because these people were investigators, they thought the government was there to help them, right? Because that's right. You think about it. So if you've been working on this for years and finally the FBI is coming to the rescue, you remember Reagan's famous, most frightening 9 words was, "I'm with the government and I'm here to help."
yeah.
But in this case, they were excited about that. And so they began just, regurgitating everything, just everything they knew about Corey Mills' history, his background, the stolen valor, his business dealings, all they knew about him. They just start pouring it onto this agent. And then all of a sudden, one day, this agent switches gears and says, there's not enough, as you heard Jill say earlier, there's not enough there. We need there's too much plausible deniability, but we'd like to know what you know about his business dealings now. And at this point, I'm beginning to realize and beginning to suspect that this agent is not investigating Corey Mills. She is rather plying them for information about what they know about Corey Mills. What do they know? How far have they gotten into the really important aspects of who Corey Mills is? And that's probably more related to his business dealings, which are, quite frankly, international weapons trading.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we got to take another break, Steve. When we come back, though, we're going to show you a clip of you talking with or trying to talk with the agent, the retired colonel. We'll be right back with Steve Baker of The Blaze And it's Whistleblower Wednesday, folks. This is a powerfully informative episode here. You need to get in here. We'll see you in a minute.
Sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing very well.
Very, very well. So, you're also an FBI agent, aren't you?
I don't know, sir.
Well, I would be curious as to what your thoughts are on the current Bongino Cash Patel administration.
I don't have any, sir. I appreciate it.
You don't have any comments on that whatsoever?
No, sir.
Are you aware that Blaze Media just came out with a story about you today and your relationship to Congressman Cory Mills?
I still have no idea what you're talking about, sir.
You have no idea what I'm talking about. Is it true that you tried to recruit a source as an undercover operative to investigate a Blaze Media journalist?
Sir, I still have no idea what you're talking about.
You have absolutely no idea what I'm
But I
talking about.
appreciate you coming, and I thank you so much.
You have no relationship with Congressman Cory Mills whatsoever? You don't? We wouldn't be able to find any connection to you with Cory Mills whatsoever?
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday. And man, this is a doozy right here. My guest today is that investigative journalist you just saw right there from the Blaze, Steve Baker. And Steve, before the break, we were talking about this agent and how you have jumped into this now. And it looks like they're doing what? They're investigating you or the Blaze?
Well, this is where it gets questionable, because she told our sources. Now, she didn't reach out to me. She didn't reach out to the Blaze. She didn't reach out to Jill Savage. She reached out to our sources, and she told them. We have it all. And by the way, we have all of their communications. We have copies of everything. We have copies of all the text messages between our sources and this particular FBI agent. We have all of the email exchanges between them. We don't have recordings of their phone conversations or their sit-down meetings. But we have the evidence and the proof of how she initiated the relationships and the interviews with our sources on her story. And as I said in the previous segment, what I began to suspect, and what they began to suspect as well, because they were becoming frightened by this agent, especially when she changed tacks about investigating stolen valor into investigating his business dealings. They began to get nervous enough that they even wanted to stop being our sources. And in fact, I will tell you that our primary source on this story, he actually told us at one point that he was pulling back. He was recanting everything. He was going to withdraw everything that he had told us, that we couldn't use his statements that he had, given to us, which he can't do. It was on the record previously already. But after I spent some time with him, we got him back on the wagon with us. But he was frightened. And because they were beginning to suspect that they were being the target, that they were the target and they were being investigated, not the congressman himself, as this agent had implied, not just implied, but explicitly told them that she was doing. And so I began to have the same misgivings and feelings for a host of reasons. All of her methods, her operations, processes and procedures were all suspect from the beginning, and I eventually reached the point where I was so concerned, even as a journalist, I was concerned that we were looking at an actual crime. We were looking at what would be called in the, to the FBI, a public corruption issue for one of their own agents. And so I began the process of trying to report this as a potential crime. And so she works out of the Orlando, what they call resident agency of the Tampa field office. And so I contacted the Tampa field office to report a public corruption situation to a supervisory special agent. So it'd be a public corruption SSA. They refused to get me in contact with an SSA. So I called the national intake line in DC. I went through all of their processes of getting with somebody there. I asked for a public corruption SSA in DC. They would not give me one. I waited a couple days. They said they would refer it up, but they said somebody might get back to you. And so I waited a couple of days. Nobody got back to me. Well, I'm a resident of North Carolina. So my FBI field office as a resident of North Carolina is in Charlotte. So I contacted the Charlotte field office to report a public corruption issue, and I couldn't even get through to them. All of their phone banks bounced me back to DC. So I finally, actually through all of my sources, I got the name of the actual public corruption SSA assigned to Charlotte and called the national intake in DC and demanded that they transfer me to that person's phone, which they did. He never answered. I left a message with a human. I left a message on a voicemail. No one ever contacted me. And now, Colonel, I am pissed off. And so on Thursday morning, 3 weeks ago, so it'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow morning, I did something that I don't like to do. Over the years of doing this, you collect a lot of phone numbers in here, and some of them are very important people, and sometimes those people, I don't know, they were important, 2 years ago, but now they happen to be the director of the FBI,
right?
And phone numbers in my phone, and his personal assistant's numbers in my phone. And on Thursday morning, 3 weeks ago, I got angry and that I was being stonewalled by the Bureau, and I put out a very concise, brief but informative text to Kash Patel and to his personal assistant, and within seconds, I had a response. And so over the course of the next 2 full business days, this was early Thursday morning, 3 weeks ago. Over the course of the next 2 business days, I was in constant communication with people on the 7th floor of the Hoover Building in DC. This is the headquarters of the FBI. And during that time, I was assured that this had been elevated to the highest levels. I was assured that Mr. Patel had been briefed himself. I was assured that it was sitting on the desk of the Deputy Director, Dan Bongino, and I was assured that it had been elevated to the desk of the General Counsel of the FBI, and that they would be looking into it. By close of business the next day on Friday, we got this unprecedented response from the FBI, from an official spokesman. And this was what makes it unprecedented is you're aware, and I'm sure everybody in your audience knows, that anytime you've seen an FBI director or an FBI representative of any kind ask a question about any case, there's only one pat answer they ever give: we cannot comment about an ongoing investigation.
That's right.
That's the only answer we ever get. And instead, after 2 full days of them looking into us, the answer we got was, we don't know anything about this. And the reality is that the 7th floor of the Hoover Building, they are just a couple of keystrokes away of being able to put in that agent's name and see what case file numbers she's working on. They are able to put our sources' names and see if they are the subject of investigations. They're able to put in Blaze Media, my name, Jill Savage's name, see if we're the source of an investigation. Of course, they would have found a case file on me from January 6th, but
that's right.
They probably knew that already anyway. and then for them to give us that absolutely unprecedented answer that we don't know anything about this speaks volumes, because, as Jill pointed out in that video segment, this is what would be called a SIM in the FBI world, a sensitive investigative matter. When a member of Congress is being investigated. This is jacked up all the way to the highest levels for approval. An agent's not going to go out and do this on their own.
Right.
Special agent in charge over a field office or a supervisory agent's not going to assign an agent to investigating a member of Congress without it being approved at the 7th floor of the Hoover Building. Not only there, but also in Pam Bondi's office or the previous Merrick Garland, because this investigation opened during the previous administration. So there would be records of this. There would be case numbers on this, and they didn't have anything on this.
Wow.
And in 3 weeks, that story has not changed. So we can only draw one of two conclusions at this point. And that is this agent was operating off book, rogue, as we said in our story, at the behest of the congressman to learn what our sources and indeed what we as a news organization have learned about his past and his history, his life, et cetera, et cetera. That's the first option. He's working at his behest. The second option is the slightly more tantalizing and darker option, but it may be the more likely option. And that is that she would have been working on what's called an MOU from the CIA, a memorandum of understanding from the CIA, to learn what our sources and what we know about this. Because in the last communication that Agent Tally Bradley had with one of our sources in the Orlando area at a Starbucks meeting, sipping their coffee, she asked this source, who runs the website CoreyMillsWatch.com. All right. This is the lady who runs that. The FBI agent asked her if she would be interested in going undercover as a confidential human source for pay to investigate another lady involved in this investigation. Well, at that point, Colonel, there was only one other lady involved in this investigation, and that was Jill Savage of Blaze Media. And guess what? In order for the FBI to open an investigation into a member of the media, it's got to go to the Attorney General's desk.
Oh, wow.
And ask me how I know that.
I will ask you how you know that. How do you know that?
Because that's exactly what happened when they opened an investigation into me. With my first interview related to January 6th with the FBI was scheduled in it was scheduled in August of 2021, just 6 months after January 6th. And when myself and my attorney arrived at the resident agency there in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I live, and two agents met us at the door and said, "We're not going to be able to interview today." Long story short, they've told us that there was an actual code in the federal regulations, U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, that specifically dictated the terms by which a federal investigative agency can interview, speak, investigate a member of the media. They have to have the express written permission from the Attorney General's Office of the United States to even do that. So they had to reschedule mine until my attorney and the Attorney General's Office in D.C. negotiated the terms by which I would sit down for a voluntary interview.
Wow. This is a tangled web. Wow. That's very interesting.
To say the least.
We got to take a break. The opening clip, the next segment is a short clip about Sean Gallagher, but I want to take a question from the audience. The hand's been up, Steve, and we'll come back to you about this subject right after this break. This is amazing, folks. You got to get in here. I'll be right back. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and man, is this hot with Steve Baker. I'm Rob Mason.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
As far as a allegation of failures by the U.S. Capitol Police officers, I want to be upfront and honest. The U.S. Capitol Police haven't shied away from the failures of that day, and those failures result in the leadership of Capitol Police, not with the police officers that were outnumbered. We suffered 80 officers who had injuries. We lost 2 of our heroes, one on the day after January 6th and one on January 9th. So we have well over 2,000 pages of after-action reviews resulting in all from the OIG reports, the GAO, General Honoré study, that go into detail in every aspect of the department of what needs to be improved. All aspects of the department needed improvement. For context,
Welcome back to the Rob Maida Show. It's Whistleblower Wednesday, and my guest today is the Blaze investigative journalist Steve Baker, who is very familiar with that guy you just saw there. We're going to talk about him in just a second because he goes through some lies, even in that short clip testifying before Congress, Mr. Gallagher did. But right now, we're talking about this investigation that I'm not sure exactly what's going on. But Steve, before the break, in the last segment, you talked about how you thought maybe it's this FBI agent is working for Mills. That's kind of that's the thread I put together when reviewing all the material in my research for this particular episode. What's your, I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you're at as far as that being actually what's going on? With 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest.
I'm 50-50 right now between the agent Shay Talley Bradley working directly for Mills, kind of as a favor to him. Now, I don't know whether he was being paid by him. He's a multimillionaire. He has had a very successful business. He lives in a penthouse apartment in D.C. that he pays $20,000 a month rent for, and he's got a rent in the 7th district there of $12,000 a month. I mean, this guy's paying over $30,000 a month in rent for two residences, so he's got money. And I'm not insinuating, implying, or suggesting in any way that she was being paid directly by him.
Right.
But she was either. But the point is she was not investigating him. We know that beyond any shadow of a doubt. She was not investigating Corey Mills. She was looking for information about how much our sources, and then of course, by way of them, what we knew at Blaze Media. And we're not the only news organization looking into him right now. As I said earlier, we know that CNN has approached some of the same sources. We know that people working for Rolling Stone have approached the same sources. So we don't know how far and wide this has gotten out and how many other news organizations are looking into this. We're certainly at the forefront of this because we already have 4 stories out about this, and those are all available at theblaze.com. So just go to the Blaze, type in Corey Mills, and you'll find these 4 stories.
Yep, they're all there. Let me take this question from the audience. He's been holding on since the first segment. Before we jump into anything else, but go ahead. Shell is our host over there in Spaces. Go ahead with your question in the audience.
Go ahead, Mel. Hey, Steve, my question is pretty simple, but it would require a longer answer. But nonetheless, what would be the motivation for Congressman Mills covering all this up? Because it seems to me that by listening to this conversation and others, that he's just putting himself out there as something he's not in order to hide all this stuff. And I can't, he's just throwing stuff to the wall to see what sticks or something worse.
Well, I mean, I think that what he's trying to find out is what is known so that he can make an attempt to get ahead of it. Because as we've already shown, look, we haven't even begun to tell all of the little bitty lies. I've already, I revealed just a moment ago that we've learned of a third marriage that he had, that he doesn't talk about in his, in his life history. We know that he claims in his bio to have received his master's from American Military University. We have the screenshot of the response from AMU saying, nope, sorry, nobody by the name of Corey Mills ever got a master's from this establishment. And then just this past weekend, I attended his church in Orlando because he has this allegation that he has converted to Islam, but he told Blaze Media in a recorded on the record interview who his church was and who his pastors are. And he's told this to multiple people over the last 4 years. And so I attended his church on Sunday morning, met with his pastors, and most of that conversation with them was off the record, so I'm going to be very sensitive about what I say. But I will tell you that Corey Mills has only attended services at that church twice in the last 4 years. It's been over a year since he attended services there. The only reason I'm even sharing that is because we already knew that. We've been tracking, one thing about a congressman is they're pretty easy to track where they've been, where they're going, that sort of thing. Like it's like a president, you know where they're at. And so we knew that he was not attending the church, but we did not know until Sunday when I went there on my own and spoke to the pastors that they have no pastoral relationship with him whatsoever. They said, look, we're flattered that a popular, seemingly really good guy congressman would go around the country saying that we're his pastor. That, it's flattering, but it's really not true.
Wow. Yeah, and they have no reason. Matter of fact, it would be to their advantage to support the guy and say, blah blah blah. That's very interesting. But the whole deal about this is that, look, we can't shy away from looking into our own, and I say our own because I consider he and I to be allies from a political perspective. Right. And we've got to dig into it. Because if there is wrongdoing there, it's got to be found out because he's in a really high public office in this country. He's making decisions. We have to have an understanding of what his background is, and if people voted for the guy based on an opposite background or a false background, the voters deserve to know that, right?
They do. And then, we haven't spent a lot of time, and I know we don't have a lot of time to get into it, but what is going to ultimately become very interesting and where we're going to learn more. And I'm not hiding anything, and I'm here, I'm not giving anything away, but we are now looking into his overseas business operations, his company. Now, his controlling shares of the company are held in a private trust right now while he's a congressman. His wife, who he is not divorced from yet, she is now the chairwoman of the board of directors of that company. The company is fully operational. He makes very, very many trips to the Middle East. We track his tail number of his plane. He and his partners one of his partners is over there right now. See, I'm revealing them right now that we're watching you. Yeah, and I don't mind telling them that. Not only is sunlight the best disinfectant, but it also keeps me and the Blaze, investigators safe. But those are called dead man switches to let people know that there's a whole lot more than just me aware of what's going on. And so we're watching this very closely. And what I think we're going to find out, and look, you're probably aware of this. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but you don't get to be involved in the international weapons trading business without the authorization, the permission, and or being worked by the CIA yourself. That's just the way it is. There's no ands or buts, and there's no way of getting around that. And he has a current office to his company open in Kabul, Afghanistan right now. So,
shocker.
America has pulled out of Afghanistan, but Corey Mills is there.
That may be the pathway through for all the money and the conversations and all that. It wouldn't surprise me if that wasn't being used in that way, having an understanding and a little bit about how business is done. It's very interesting. More needs to be known. You know, my advice to him, and advice is exactly what it's worth when it's unpaid and free. But hey, man, I would sit down with Jill and Steve and just let's get it all out in the open, because, you know, essentially or eventually the sunlight's going to come, and it's better to get in front of it with the people that are, you know, at least, you know, started out on your side. I mean, that's what I would do. But, you know,
when our first story came out, it was addressing the issue about him possibly having converted to Islam. And so after that first story came out, Glenn Beck sent Congressman Mills a text and told him that he was welcome to come onto his show again, that he would give him as much time as he needed to explain himself. And Beck said, now, I will be asking you the hard questions if you come on the show. And Corey Mills responded and only said, I have always been a Christian. That was his only response. He did not take advantage of the opportunity to come on Glenn's show and speak to 10 million people. He didn't respond to it at all. And so that's been his only response since then. And, you know, where it's heading from here, it would be the best thing for him to do. The best thing for him to do would be to sit down with Jill and I, but that's probably not going to happen.
Probably not. But anyway, let's move to another section of corruption here for a second. One that which you're very familiar with, and you got my attention with when I think you posted the letter from the union for the Capitol Police officers objecting to this guy becoming the chief. And I got to be honest, Steve, this guy slipped through my radar because he kind of sounds clean, etc., in his testimony, and I really wasn't paying attention down below the level of the highly corrupt, what's her name, Yoganda something or other?
Yogananda Pittman.
Yogananda Pittman. I mean, that one was just terrible and really did a lot of damage to a lot of Americans, in my opinion. But this guy, Sean Gallagher, man, why is he so bad? But why is Speaker Johnson's the guy that signs off on this, I believe, but want to elevate him to be the chief?
Unfortunately, the speaker does not have the authority to block this nomination. This is by legislation the purview over this hiring and elevation to from assistant chief to acting chief of Sean Gallagher is from the Capitol Police Board, and the board consists of the Senate Sergeant at Arms, the House Sergeant at Arms, and the architect of the Capitol. Now, could Congress intervene? Yes, they could. And there's going to probably be enough outrage that our sources tell us that it's very, very unlikely that he will be given that job permanently. Most policing agencies tend to want to bring somebody in from the outside anyway when the vacancy is the top seat. You know, because of the nepotism and all those things, you know, that go on, you know, if you've been in that department for 30 years. And so it's just better to do that. And then again, on the way out, former chief now, Thomas Manger, he actually endorsed Sean Gallagher to get the job because he said he understands the culture of the Capitol Police. And the culture of the Capitol Police is what is so corrupt at its core. And that's the problem. And so, you know, I opened an investigation into Gallagher a couple of years ago because he was one of the primary characters up in the the command center of the Capitol Police headquarters on January 6th. And he was one of the ones specifically and purposefully related to the intelligence failures not being passed up to Chief Sund, Stephen Sund at the time, along with in coordination with Yogananda Pittman, who was the number 2 assistant chief at the time. And then additionally, there were so many other anomalies that happened under Gallagher's watch. But if you go back to when Gallagher was just a lowly captain, he was caught by Internal Affairs, or what they call OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility. He was caught in a fraud scheme, basically a time card scheme where they were signing off on extra hours, overtime hours, cheating and stealing money, not just from the department, but from the taxpayer. And then not only was he caught in that, he was caught forging time cards.
Oh man. I gotta. Unfortunately, I got to end it there. We're going to have to do a whole nother show about this issue once it develops a little bit more, because I want to dig into his whole in the command post thing that you talked about, because he's got to have a lot of responsibility, and I suspect that he did for the failures at the operational decision-making level. Well, Steve, we'll stay in touch about both of these stories, and I'll get you back on when you're available to continue this conversation. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Colonel. Look forward to being with you again soon.
That's Steve Baker, USA on X. Explosive story, folks. Tomorrow's Truth Thursday. Dr. Robert Schuller is back with us to talk about the first wrongful death medical case to make it through the courts. It was a 19-year-old Down syndrome young lady that died from the COVID vaccine. I'll see you then on Truth Thursday.